And the thing about these pagan nations is that they were in large part vile and wicked, devil-worshipping pagans who were sacrificing their children to the devil. You know, I mean, how do we justify these wars in the Bible? You know, the liberals and the atheists, they're criticizing the Bible about that all the time, right? They always go to all those Old Testament verses only. That's the only thing they look at. But again, the reality is that these were very wicked nations. These weren't like just, you know, some nice people in those nations. They were sacrificing their children to devils and worshiping idols and worshiping literal Satan worshipers in essence. And it was also paramount and tantamount for God to establish a holy nation and a peculiar people, nation of priests and kings, in order to bring about the Messiah, who would then save not just one nation or two nations, but all nations, and provide a way of salvation for all people. And so if Israel was not established, Jesus could not come forth, right? Remember, salvation was first to the Jews, and then when the Jews rejected Jesus, it went out into all the world, and the Gentiles could come in. And that was the plan, you know, by God's foreknowledge all along. He knew it wasn't a surprise to God. But, you know, if Israel wasn't established, the Messiah couldn't come forth. It was very important. It was important that God establish a holy nation that would be secure and be free from the idolatry and evils of the other nations. And so that took the severity of God to establish. It was just the reality of what was required in the Old Testament. But this was a unique circumstance in history in which God wanted to establish that holy nation that would follow his ways and his precepts and prepare for the way for Jesus. Here's why he did it. Leviticus 18:21. It says, "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Moloch, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord." And so by commingling with the surrounding nations, Israel was falling into idolatry and child sacrifice, because evil is infectious, and these were evil nations. And that's what we see today. I mean, how much better are we with abortion and Planned Parenthood? That's what we call them, death mills and, you know, baby mills. They're just going in and killing millions upon millions of babies every year. It's the same thing that the pagan nations were sacrificing their children to Moloch and the fires, right? And so this was happening in Israel as well. Psalm 106 says this. Take a look at Psalm 106, because it really answers the criticisms and accusations leveled against the Bible and God's people for conquering surrounding nations. Psalm 106, 34, 42 says this. "They did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them, but were mingled among the heathen and learned their works, and they served their idols, which were a snare unto them. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and of their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. Thus were they defiled with their own works, and went a-whoring with their own inventions. Therefore was the wrath of the Lord kindled against his people, insomuch that he abhorred his own inheritance. And he gave them into the hand of the heathen, and they that hated them ruled over them. Their enemies also oppressed them, and they were brought into subjection under their hand." And so we see the reason given here. Again, these weren't like, you know, good little nations that were just peaceful and minding their own business. And, you know, they were always attacking Israel, first of all. They were the instigators in many cases. The Philistines didn't even belong in that land. They were squatters who had come from Grecian islands through, like, by way of boats and had taken over, were squatting in the promised land. They had to be removed so the nation of Israel could be formed. But the harsh reality in ancient times was that if you did not subdue the nations, they would subdue you, and they would lead you into their wicked ways. And that's exactly what had happened. As the Israelites forsook God, they fell into idolatry and were aborting their kids through the fires and child sacrifice to devils. And God says that is why he gave them into the hand of the heathen. You know, we see this pattern. Whenever God's people disobeyed God, enemy nations would come and defeat them and enslave them. and they would have to repent again and then, get right with God again. And so we see that repeated here. But God's people would have been diluted and polluted and led into idolatry and devil worship and abortion in the form of child sacrifice if they didn't fortify their own nation and secure their own borders. And, it's a very unique time in history because, again, the nation of Israel, it was just tantamount that it be created so Jesus can come forth. So the law could be established. And so God took a very hard stance against these pagan, devil-worshipping nations in order to subdue them. And so, that's why we call Planned Parenthood an abortion mill or a death camp for the unborn, and compare the millions dead every single year to an abortion holocaust. Okay, and liberals have the gall to criticize a nation for wanting to secure its own borders and subdue its enemies who are actual devil worshippers, but then they turn around and kill millions of unborn babies every year. It's all social signaling, it's confusion, it's hypocrisy from the left. And then they turn around again and they obscure our natural God-given rights by suppressing speech and undermining the free exchange of ideas, and are hypocrites who contribute virtually nothing to society but social signaling.